Welcome to How to Sell More. Today, we're discussing content IP. I say content IP. What's that? We're going to get into it. As a marketing strategy, and we're talking with Brendan Hufford. Brendan is a teacher turned SEO master who built a track record over at ActiveCampaign. He went on to lead and scale growth teams at 2 different agencies, and today he's the founder of Growth Sprints, where he takes SaaS companies from 10 million to 100 million plus in annual recurring revenue. I'm Mark Drager. Let's get into it. So Brendan, you are well known, of course, as an SEO leader, and you talk about myths of SEO. You talk about all the detailed stuff. And earlier before we hit record, I was like, are we talking about SEO? And we're like, fuck SEO. I don't know if you want me to say that out loud.
No, you can say it, man. It's a distribution channel, right? Like it's not the thing, like that industry gets super romantic about it. And it's like, I'm really good at it. And I'm just not romantic about it. Like I'm very agnostic, especially as somebody who has bridged marketer into seller, right? Like a lot of marketers never have to sell. So they don't understand that there's stuff that they're cramming in their SEO blogs or their emails or whatever why doesn't this compel anybody to buy our stuff? And it's like, because you're just passing off leads and then the sales team has to like try and make something happen, right?
Well, I know what you're passionate about and what you're really focused on over at Growth Sprints, your agency, and a lot of the work you do is like, as you just mentioned, it's not enough to just like get attention. We know this in awareness advertising, right? Like, oh, great. So you got awareness, so you got views. Okay. Or with SEO, like, oh, we have this page traffic. Okay. We got these rankings. Okay. Like it all excites all of the technical people that us business owners work with. But what we care about is like, how much money are we making? And so you're in a really unique position because you have this other approach, this slightly different approach. Walk me through this idea of content IP. What do you mean by it? What's the power of it? Help us understand how we can leverage this.
Yeah, great question. So content IP kind of happened because I saw 2 different things happening in the world. One was in my world of working with SaaS and software companies, I saw a lot of them like naming their category, like creating these super corny names that were overcomplicated because they all wanted to pretend that they weren't email marketing software. They wanted to be customer experience automation, or like, it's just like things marketers do when they are bored, I guess, or don't have enough work, right? So that was happening in the world. And then I also came upon this thing that is called a conceptual scoop. Have you ever heard of a conceptual scoop before?
I have not.
Okay, so this is going to be really exciting. You have heard of conceptual scoops before.
Everyone buckle up because this is exciting.
Really excited about this. So you have heard of conceptual scoops before because you have heard of the Great Resignation. Yes. And you have heard of quiet quitting. So what happens, these are conceptual scoops where in a long time before journalists were like, to get a scoop, you needed like insider information or you needed like some sort of data to back it up. And now what we're seeing is journalists are kind of zooming out and they're going, oh, wait, I see this large macro trend happening where we had the Great Resignation and all these people, which is just such wonderful wordplay. That really matters in this. The words, you have to spend time on the words. So we have the Great Resignation and it's like, well, now people aren't leaving their jobs. They're just quiet quitting. They're staying there for security, but they're just doing the bare minimum, right? Or they're just tired of their employers asking them to work 90 hours a week, things like that. So they noticed these conceptual scoops happening in the world, and then they gave names to them, and it took off like wildfire. And the reason it took off was because a bunch of people heard those words and were like, yes, that is what's happening. Like, I feel that every day in my day-to-day life. And when you give somebody words for a thing that they have been seeing happen and can describe long form, like I just gave you that short rant about like, well, I'm tired of having to work 80 hours a week or whatever else, or like all these things, no benefits, right? They now had words for what was happening. So everybody latched onto it and ran with it. And the same is true in your business. When you really understand your customers and your clients, and you give them words or phrases, and we can get into how to do this in a second, but you give them the words or phrases to describe the problems that they have been describing to you long form for years. And as sellers, maybe a little bit different than marketers, you have a leg up in that you have the closest possible proximity to them at a moment of decision making, right? You can do this probably better than anybody.
And so maybe because of my background in creative and strategy and marketing and advertising and at the end of the day, I'm a strategist. I work with business owners to help them through some of the stuff you're talking about. But earlier I said, like, isn't this direct response? We were kind of joking about that because I come from the corporate communications and advertising background. And the more exposed I got to the modern version of direct response or online sales or info products or whatever you want to call it, the more I was like, oh, it's just shifting from solution focused to problem focused. It's just trying to get in the heads of the people we're communicating with. And rather than me, us, we can, we're the best, we're the best. It's like, you have this problem that we are aware of, we have a solution for, and we can help you with. We can save you time, we can save you money, and we can get you better results. Is this what you're talking about with the idea of content IP, or is this a step further?
Sometimes there's an interim solution. There's a way they've been solving it so far. And simply saying, like, we can help you do it better or whatever else isn't compelling enough to get them to change. Like, we're humans. When we find things that work for all sorts of adaptive evolutionary reasons, we don't really want to change. A great example of this in the non-tech world is people with sleep apnea, or people who are having trouble sleeping at night and they snore super loud. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about? You know people who have this?
When I was heavier, I had some issues with my sleep as well.
Same. I'm a big dude. But what happens is people, a lot of times, they snore really loud. They wake up many times. They stop breathing throughout the night. And a solution that's really common is to get a breathing machine. This giant, in a lot of cases, giant, like over the head, astronaut looking thing with a tube that's incredibly loud. And a lot of times it's like, look, if you just go get this surgery, it'll fix it mostly, and then you don't need the machine. But surgery feels expensive, it feels scary, and it is the best possible solution. But why would you do that when you can just get this machine?
Isn't the better solution to just diet and exercise and lose weight?
Could be, but people have breathing issues. It's not always just like big people, right?
Okay.
So the thing is, maybe a year or so ago, I heard a radio commercial, and the guy doing the ad read on the radio commercial used a unique phrase that I had never heard before that moved me in a way that I didn't think I cared so much about this issue. And that is, he said that a lot of people who suffer from this end up getting a sleep divorce, where they end up sleeping in a separate room from their spouse or their partner, and they lose all of that connection. And I thought to myself, oh, that's putting the knife in and twisting it, because you're not getting a divorce from your spouse, but you're getting a sleep divorce. It is extremely triggering. It is extremely volatile. It's also the reality of like that a lot of people feel, and they can describe long form of like, in my case, my wife would have to sleep in a separate room, and I don't, like, my kids don't come in the room at night and things like that. And like, even though like I'm annoyed with them waking me up, like they're still my kids. I want them to feel safe and whatever else, like all these issues, like we can't travel because it's too loud or whatever. Sleep divorce is what moves people to be like, I'm willing to spend more, take on a bigger risk, maybe do something outside of my comfort zone because I have named the problem. And prior to that, again, like people could have described that, like, yeah, they sleep in a separate room, right? But sleep in a separate room does not move people to action the same way sleep divorce does. And I think that we would get a lot more benefit out of, instead of talking about our solutions, really focusing on the problems and then naming them, creating true IP, intellectual property. And then regardless of channel, whether you're using this in you're capturing demand from SEO and you're sliding this into articles, or using it in emails or postcards or billboards, I don't care, any kind of marketing, right? When you have that IP and you're the one championing this name for this problem they have, customers and clients are like, shut up and take my money. Like, you're the best one to solve it because you understand me better than anybody else. This is a truth in marketing and sales we've known for a long time, right? When they feel like you can define the problem better than them, they choose you. I think this gets us there. And it's the thing that a lot of people have missed for a long time.
Yeah, this is amazing. I hadn't heard that term before. And I think it's great, the idea of content IP. And I do recognize with the clients that we've worked with over the years that I always explain to business owners that there's a certain stage where you have to professionalize aspects of your business as you're scaling, as you're growing, as you're moving up. So you may start by professionalizing, let's say, your delivery or the back end or your ERP system or something, or you may be professionalizing your leadership team, and you're like, well, we've gotten by this far, but we need to start hiring like a real COO or like a real CFO, and you're going to professionalize parts of your business. People come to us because they're ready to professionalize, their brand or their sales or their marketing or their positioning or their copy or what have you. But I've always seen this idea of like at a certain point, you have to stand for something. You have to create something with white space that's uniquely yours. And that's what you're describing right now. I was on a call yesterday with an amazing company, an amazing leader. But as we broke down all of their 12-month growth plan, it was all either extremely generic, or it was leveraging someone else's brand, and they were getting leads through affiliates and other things. But there was nothing that I could like grab onto to say like, this is yours. This is what you stand for. This is what your message, your focus, your USP. And so that's why they're talking to us, because we're going to help them develop it. But I've never thought of it as this idea of content IP, where other than just at a certain point, to me, every brand needs to hit a stage where they have to do this, because you can't just be like everyone else. Is there a stage? Is there a size? Is it a mindset? Like how early should people be grabbing onto this idea and developing this in-house?
Look, like I'll be honest with you, this can very much feel like a nice to have. Like you can be a B plus better solution, or a mid-tier player for a long time and be fine. But eventually a crunch is going to come in whatever industry. Like we saw it during the pandemic with restaurants, and we see it now with like software. Whatever you do where you make money, at some point that industry is going to get crunched by, and it could be by macroeconomic forces, it could be by political things, it could also be by AI or whatever else. Like things are happening in the world that are changing the market. And whenever you have, this is a tech term, but like you have product market fit, where it's like, hey, we are well aligned, as our product is so well aligned with the market that even if we don't get any new customers, we'll continue gaining revenue because our existing customers keep using our product more and more, right? The problem is if your product doesn't change, but the market does, like you lose that fit. So constantly having your ear to the ground and having conversations with customers, finding out like what these pain points are and how they're changing over time is so important. I would argue it's the core like skill set. Like I don't care how good you are at some channel of marketing or how good you are at, I'm a closer, cool, great. But like, do you, the only thing that makes you a good marketer, closer, or even just entrepreneur and business owner in general is that like you're willing to go above and beyond to stay in close proximity to the customer. I joke a lot with my clients who are typically marketers in big software companies of like, you're going to live and die, like your career is going to live and die by your like how close you can stay to the customer. As a marketer, can you stay closer than the product team? Can you stay closer than the sales team or the support team or the customer success team? Usually marketer is like fifth on that list out of 5, right? But if you can be number 1 and you can become this source of truth in your organization, in your company, in your business for the customer, what you end up doing, and this is so fun, it's like an old school sales technique that they use, especially at like gyms, where when they're selling a membership, they never sit across the table from you. They pull the chairs around on the same side of the table. It's just physically like we are on the same team. I love that. It's hard to do like virtually, right? Like this, but you can kind of do it with this IP, right? Of like, look, I exist to help you solve this problem. It is the only reason my business exists, is to help you navigate this one thing, right? And eventually over time, it's like, well, they have these other problems. Can we name those too? Right.
So who's doing this well? I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm just so curious. Like, throw us a few examples that we might be aware of, just so we can visualize exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, I love this. Okay, so part of why I'm beating this drum, and this isn't a cop-out answer, but part of why I'm beating this drum is I don't think a lot of people are doing this super well. I think that it is really an opportunity, which is why I've started pushing. It's why I was like, hey, I'm doing SEO and all this like keyword researchy stuff. And I'm like, this is cool at like capturing existing demand, but I'm constantly at the, the whim of the market versus like, let me create demand, right? Where maybe they didn't exist, especially if you do have something interesting or novel to sell. And maybe the market is like, I don't know about that yet. I gave you one example that's like a consumer example. Maybe another like consumer example would be Beard Brand did this thing. And this is where we get a little like silly, but it resonated with me. They ran this whole campaign around scent confusion. This is so don't laugh at me, Mark. Like,
I'm not
this
laughing
is real.
at you. I'm just like,
and they're like,
what
look,
does
man,
that
guys,
even mean?
Guys wear a hair product that smells like one thing. They put a different cologne on. They got some rando deodorant, and you have these like 4 competing smells, and it's just scent confusion. And I was like, oh, what if I did buy a cologne, a beard oil, and a hair product that all smelled the same? And they were like, oh, we got that. And I was like, fuck, you got me.
So so find the real problem, invent a wrapper that helps frame that real problem, and then immediately leads to the solution.
Yeah. In the software. So that was a little bit of like making a problem where maybe there isn't one, but I would argue there kind of is. Like, if you really did like care about how you smell, like
which Harry Potter house do you belong to, right? Like there's a known problem here. What am I? Am I a Slytherin? Like, so I'm joking, but
if you're cool, you're a Slytherin. Let's be honest.
I am a Slytherin, actually, but I only know that because my wife is a huge Potter head. But this is being used right now in quiz funnels, I mean, which have been popular for the last few years, or challenges, right? The idea of like, have a known need, wrap it in something which is like just irresistible, like Myers-Briggs with 16 personalities, or just like the things that humans go like, oh, which one am I? Or what's the solution, or how do I do it? And then pull them in and then go like, and ta-da, here is the answer. We have it for you.
Yeah. In the software world, there's a lot of companies that I think do this well. Some of them do it obviously better than others, but it's still like exceedingly rare. We're still looking at a very small minority who are not just, everybody generically talks about the same pain points of their audience, but like, do you really think that your team of 5 marketers is better than the other 30 companies' team of 5 marketers? Like, marginally, maybe. But I
care more. And I work harder, and we have experience, and we have our ear to the ground.
All of that. I love that. Yeah. We're in lockstep with our customers. There's all these like buzzwords, right?
Yeah.
I love that sort of stuff. But what's funny about that is that like they really like, it's just marginal benefit, like stacking on top of things. And when you're willing to do what I've seen, even in my work with SparkToro, how close they're willing to get to the customer, and they're like not only using eating their own caviar, using their own platform for that sort of thing, but also like the depth of customer interviews that are happening to figure out like, who is this best for, how is it best for them, like all of that sort of stuff. Because eventually, like I worked at a company where it was like every small business active campaign, email marketing, everybody's our audience. Every business owner should use Active Campaign. I'm like, yeah, but can we pick? They're like, absolutely not. We're for everybody. And I'm like, oh, this is so hard, right? Like that sort of thing. But when you have that IP, the other benefit of this, and maybe a last benefit, is like you also become not just a spokesperson for your customer, but you become the place that like the top talent wants to work, right? Not just the top marketers, salespeople, designers, whatever. But when you can define the problem for a customer base better than everybody else, everybody who's really good wants to come work for you. And that talent pipeline, I have found, is way more important than almost everything we've talked about today. It is what you will like live and die by in a lot of cases, is not just like your proximity to the customer, but what that gets you, which is the best people, the people who are top of the world in their craft, want to come do that at your business. And that changes everything.
2 things from the past that this kind of reminds me of for whatever reason. Are you familiar with Obvious Adams? I think it's Obvious Adams. Is that it? It was written like in 1920 or something, and they interviewed. It was like a Evening Post article. But have you heard of this guy?
No.
So back in the early days, I guess the 1910s, 1920s, when advertising was starting to become a thing. There was this guy who wanted to work in the ad industry. And so he started like the mailroom, and he begged and begged and begged, and he would not get moved up. But then they noticed that this guy had this really uncanny way of just spotting the obvious. And they named him Obvious Adams or whatever. And you can read this book, you can listen to it. It's a really quick thing. But what a great story and lesson for all of us, because this guy got hired to get sent places. And for example, in one of the stories, he went to, Atlanta, and there was these 3 locations, and one did really well, but the other ones didn't. And he just went there and he just walked up and down the street for the whole day. And he just counted how many people went by. And he just looked at the street and he looked at it and he tried to figure out, he like answer the question, why is this store doing well when another store isn't doing well? And he determined the entrance was not on the main street. It was on a 45-degree angle or something. And because of the direction that people happen to walk on the certain side of the street, if people are walking up the street, they wouldn't see it. But if they're walking down the street, they would. And the very fact that the sign was in the wrong place is what kept people out of the store. Like, now you might say, well, that was in the 1920s, and people are not more sophisticated today. I mean, it's just a different channel with a different sign in a different place. But I love that. And it's so simple. And then the next thing that this reminded me of is like early days of Mad Men, the show, when, Don Draper says, it's toasted. Your cigarettes are toasted. And the guy's like, but everything is toasted. He's like, yeah, but no one else says it. Yeah. And it's like, I think if you're listening to this, you may hear this idea of content IP and what Brendan is saying. And you might be like, yeah, but like, I don't have anything special. It's not that you don't have anything special. It's just that maybe you're not willing to say it. Or you might be so in your bubble that you don't even realize what you're sitting on. Like that you could be sitting on the most amazing thing and just no one's saying it. No one's talking about it. Like this cigarette guy, Don Draper pulled out, it's toasted. It's just better for this reason. And so I think this is awesome.
Yeah, the trick I give people a lot is if you want to get most of the way there, you can get really nerdy. You can learn like jobs to be done frameworks and how to do customer intervieys and all these things. And I think that's really valuable.
Or you can just hire our agency. I'll throw that in there.
I think like the other thing is like understand I like working with clients that have tried to do it themselves and are like, we know enough to value how much this is worth. Right. Both in terms of outcomes, but also us not doing it ourselves. A lot of times I tell people to read Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. Learn, like, yes, those are negotiation techniques, but it's really annoying if I'm like, hey, why is this a problem for you? And you tell me, and I'm like, why? Yeah, I'm trying to get deeper on like the why this is actually matters to you. But like that sort of like, he gives you so many more tools, like the mirroring and everything else that like, you can get deeper into something like that. It's almost becomes therapy, where then people reveal like, oh, these are like the true pain points we have. Then you name those pain points. And that makes everything else you do so much easier.
One of my greatest strategies is I try to listen and write down every adjective or every word or the way someone describes stuff when I'm talking to them. Because, you say it one way and then they ask you a question. You're like, well, they didn't get that. But I want to know what that question is, or they use different words or what have you. And so this is amazing, man. I'm so happy that you were able to join us. I want to end off by asking the one question we ask every single guest. What is your number one tip or strategy to selling more?
I'll try to go one step further. I'll give you a really quick framework for like how to do this, right? So once you create this IP, because I think, look, like somebody's listening this far, watch this far, they're in, right? Really quickly, the way you do this is you create content using this IP, create content around the problem. The first roadblock that people will encounter with the problem, almost everybody skips that. So the problem, the roadblock, give them a template to solve the problem, right? Like I just kind of did. I was like, read Chris Voss's book, talk to your customers, figure that out. Share a customer story of a customer or a client, somebody you've helped solve this piece of IP, this problem that you have. And then share somebody interesting. I call it a high-level interesting roundup of like other people that they want to be. Who is their like main character energy type of like person or company? Who do they aspire to be? Tell them how that company or that person or that business solves the problem. That 5 steps will take you a long way.
Okay, to wrap up this conversation, let's get into the 3-point roundup. Number 1, There's power in naming the problem. Being able to create a really unique brand or identifier or buzzword or keyword or whatever you might call it for common problems can not only capture the attention of the people you're trying to get in front of, but it can drive a lot of action. So maybe you should consider this content IP thing. Number 2, content IP is a marketing strategy that people have been using for a long time, including many of our clients and even ourselves over here at Sales Loop. Now, a really successful content IP strategy is going to involve storytelling that not only presents the problem, but also guides your audience through their journey to overcoming it. So you're going to want to address those initial roadblocks. You're going to want to offer actionable solutions, and then you're going to want to be able to position your brand as the thought leader to be able to solve those problems. And number 3, if you want to develop a really effective content IP strategy, or you want to basically own the problem, name the problem, create your own white space, you've got to get close to the customers. There's no way to be able to turn out really relevant, great work if you are not so intimately involved with your customers, with your clients, with the problems, with the market, that you know that there's a lot of nuance here. A lot of times, I hate to say this, but every single day, money is wasted. Budgets are wasted. Potential is wasted, sending the wrong messages to the wrong people at the wrong time. It's something that drives me crazy. It's something that I spend almost every day at my agency helping clients overcome that very problem. And what I love about the type of work and the type of conversation that Brendan and I have is he really hit the point home, and he really reminded me, and I hope he reminded you, that we've got to be really close, really, really close to our customers and our clients. Sorry, I went on a bit of a rant there. I'm passionate about this. But I want to thank Brendan Hufford for joining us. You can learn more about him by heading over to his website, brendanhufford.com. You can also find out more about his company, growthsprints.co, or you can find him on Instagram at @TheBrendanHufford. Now, while you're over there on Instagram, why not look us up as well at Sales Loop Brand? You can drop us a DM. You can ask me a question. You can let me know. You can say, Mark, I love this podcast. It's amazing. And I'll send you a voice note back. Or, I mean, you can give me some criticism too. Now, one last thing. If you have made it this deep into this episode, you really should subscribe to this podcast. Why would you do that? Well, every single week, I share practical strategies and tips, just like the conversation that we had with Brendan, to supercharge your business growth and to boost sales. With that, I'm Mark Drager, and we will catch you in the next episode.